The Salem witch trials, the Red Scare, McCarthyism, the War on Terror. Each of these historical events have fear and mass hysteria in common. But one event is always swept under the rugs, ignored, never talked about by people outside of those who either lived it or those who knew of the major events that happened because of it. The Satanic Panic. But to fully understand the Satanic Panic better, we have to begin understanding what started this all. As far as history can tell us, that is. A phrase you so commonly hear, one that refers to an instance not many people know about. A witch hunt. During the mid-14th century and continuing into the mid-17th century, many Europeans began witch hunts dedicated to finding any and all who practiced witchcraft and could conjure up powers bestowed upon them by the devil. It was the cause of death for an estimated 50,000 people total over the course of 300 years. Sure, that's roughly 166 people every year for 300 years. A very low number. But remember that these are innocent people who are put to death by what could likely be their neighbor who didn't like the way they were looked at, or their ex-wife or ex-husband. Regardless of the reason, most of these people were more than likely innocent, put to death for nothing. But what could convince all these people that nothing was something? According to the Code of Hammurabi, if a man has put a spell upon another man, and it is not yet justified, he upon whom the spell is laid shall go to the holy river, into the holy river shall he plunge. If the holy river overcomes him and he is drowned, the man who put the spell upon him shall take possession of his house. If the holy river declares him innocent and he remains unharmed, the man who laid the spell shall be put to death. He that plunged into the river shall take possession of the house of him who laid the spell upon him. In the Hebrew Bible, it mentions in Deuteronomy 18:10-12, "No one shall be found among you who makes son or daughter pass through fire, who practices divination, or is a soothsayer, or an augur, or a sorcerer, or one that casts spells, or who consults ghosts or spirits, or who seeks oracles from the dead. For whoever does these things is abhorrent to the Lord." One infamous case of this happening is that of Joan of Arc, who was a saint prior to her execution at the age of 19. Joan of Arc was a defender of the French nation. She had claimed to be under the divine guidance of the Archangel Michael, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine. From the visions she saw of the three, she insisted that Charles VII of France be coronated, stating that they had told her that he would help save France from English domination. She had helped in the sieges of Paris and La Charité. Both were unsuccessful. She organized a company of volunteers to help in the efforts of relieving Compiègne, only to end up captured by the Burgundian troops occupying it. Handed to the English, she was then put on trial under accusations of heresy and burned at the stake. Some have theorized that Joan of Arc, due to her delusions in believing she could see the Archangel Michael, Joan was identified as a witch, and in the same fashion as those following her, was burned at the stake. 1600s America, located in colonial Massachusetts. The village of Salem begins a series of trials prosecuting men, women, and children for witchcraft. Many historians claim that it was a random outburst of mass hysteria that went from one person to another, until everybody in Salem, Massachusetts had begun to fear that someone in their small town could possess powers bestowed upon them by the devil. According to one Peabody Essex museum, It all started when several young girls in Salem village reported that unseen agents or forces were afflicting them. The ministers suspected witchcraft. In the 17th century, a witch was understood as a person who agreed to serve the devil in opposition to the Christian church. It was outlawed. Following this event on February 29th, 4 men and 4 girls traveled to the town of Salem to make complaints against 3 women. The next day, interrogations began, and from here, 25 men and women were killed under the assumption that they were, in fact, in connection with the devil and possessing powers to threaten the Christian church. More than 200 people were accused. Understanding this, we can see how just one instance of claims can cause an upheaval in a small community, leading to a year-long witch hunt. So what happens when you amplify this in a more modern era America? Following the Russian Revolution of 1917, the United States suffered anarchist bombings in 1919. 36 booby-trapped dynamite-filled bombs were mailed to politicians at the time, including John D. Rockefeller. Americans nationwide fell into a panic that they were being invaded by socialists, communists, and anarchists. This whole section of US history deserves an entire video on its own, but the main takeaway is that many of these accusations of a communist being in the midst came from union workers going on strike demanding more wages. For this, they were called communists and told that Russia would be more suitable for them. It's not shocking to see why a revolt would come of this. Following the Second World War, the fall of China, and the Korean War, United States Senator Joseph McCarthy would make a public speech on Lincoln Day, February 9th, 1950.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight as we celebrate the 141st birthday of one of the greatest men in American history, I would like to be able to talk about what a glorious day today is in the history of the world. As we celebrate the birth of this man who, with his whole heart and soul, hated war, I would like to be able to speak of peace in our time, of war being outlawed, and of worldwide disarmament. These would be truly appropriate things to be able to mention as we celebrate the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. 5 years after a world war has been won, men's hearts should anticipate a long peace, and men's minds should be free from the heavy weight that comes with war. But this is not such a period, for this is not a period of peace. This is a time of the Cold War. This is a time when all the world is split into 2 vast, increasingly hostile armed camps, a time of a great armaments race. Today, we are engaged in a final, all-out battle between communistic atheism and Christianity. The modern champions of communism have selected this as the time. And, ladies and gentlemen, the chips are down. They are truly down.
McCarthy would present a piece of paper that he claimed held a list of known communists working for the State Department. And with that one accusation, McCarthy would single-handedly start the Second Red Scare. Or, that's what many would have you believe. However, it had been ongoing for a while following the passing of Harry S. Truman's Executive Order 9835. If you ask me, the Red Scare didn't really ever stop. Not between the first, and not even now. However, now, it is too little too late to make a big deal of it, especially when they've already infiltrated our country. November 1st, 1980, Lawrence Pasdar and Michelle Smith would release a book titled Michelle Remembers, which would document Pasdar's therapy sessions with Smith. Throughout these sessions, she would recount her experiences with the Church of Satan, claiming she had been abused by them. Pasdar would put Smith under hypnosis in order to help her recover some of these memories. She would recount attending rituals as long as 81 days, being tortured, locked in cages, sexually assaulted, even witnessed human sacrifices in which she would be rubbed down with the blood and body parts of those who were sacrificed, whether it be infants or adults. After the publication of the book, Michelle and Lawrence would go on to national television to tell their story in interviews. And following this, a sudden uprise in reports of physical and sexual abuse as part of satanic rituals would hit the United States in a massive wave. From Dungeons and Dragons to heavy metal music, all pieces of media were attacked by God-fearing men and women, scared that Satan had found his way into the hearts and minds of their youth. During the 1980s and 1990s, there would often be news coverage of how to spot satanic cults. Law enforcement would make guides to satanic cults and what to do with them. Metal bands would be forced to denounce any and all connection to the devil. Mass hysteria was running rampant, and the media only fed into it more. The Satanic Panic wasn't just located in the United States alone, it was spreading worldwide. By the late 1980s, if a therapist believed that one of their patients was suffering from satanic ritual abuse, they could suggest exorcising them, Christian psychotherapy, or self-help groups. The United States Congress had even doubled its budget for child protection programs. In 1983, the McMartin preschool, operated by a family in Manhattan Beach, California, would be charged with hundreds of acts of sexual abuse towards the children held at the school. According to one mother, Judy Johnson, her son had painful bowel movements, which she believed to be the result of him having been sodomized by teachers of the preschool. According to some sources, the child had denied these accusations. Several hundred children were later interviewed by the CII, or the Children's Institute International of Los Angeles, which was an abuse therapy clinic, using highly deceptive and suggestive techniques in order to lure the children into revealing that they had, in fact, been abused. By 1984, the CII had claimed nearly 360 children were abused. Key McFarlane, who had interviewed all of the children, had received $146,000 to interview and examine them. Today, that is about $556,000. The following is an example of one of the videotaped interviews to give you an idea of what the tactics deployed by McFarlane were.
Mr. Monkey is a little bit chicken, and he can't remember any of the naked games, but we think that you can, because we know a naked games that you were around for, because the other kids told us, and it's called Naked Movie Star. Do you remember that game, Mr. Alligator, or is your memory too bad?
I don't remember that game.
Oh, Mr. Alligator.
Well, it's, a little song that me and a friend heard of.
Oh?
Well, I heard out loud someone singing, Naked Movie Star, Naked Movie Star.
You know that, Mr. Alligator? That means you're smart, because that's the same song the other kids knew, and that's how we really know you're smarter than you look. So you better not play dumb, Mr. Alligator.
Well, I didn't really hear a whole lot. I just heard someone yell it from out in the house. Someone yelled it.
Maybe, Mr. Alligator, you peeked in the window one day and saw them playing it, and maybe you could remember and help us.
Well, no, I haven't seen anyone playing Naked Movie Star. I've only heard the song.
What good are you? You must be dumb.
Well, I don't know really. Remember seeing anyone play that? 'Cause I wasn't there when people are playing it.
You weren't? You weren't? That's why we're hoping maybe you saw... See, a lot of these puppets weren't there, but they got to see what happened.
Well, I saw a lot of fighting.
Some accusations had gone from being sexually abused to seeing witches fly and being taken through underground tunnels. Those tunnels were supposedly where most of the abuse had taken place. One of the children even went as far as to identify Chuck Norris as one of the abusers. Judy Johnson, the first accuser we had mentioned, talked about how Raymond Buckley could fly. Judy Johnson was also found dead from chronic alcoholism. She had also been diagnosed prior to this with paranoid schizophrenia. However, all of her mental health issues were withheld from the defense for 3 years. On March 22nd of 1984, Virginia McMartin, her daughter Peggy McMartin Bucky, grandchildren Ray and Peggy Ann Bucky, and the teachers Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babbitt Spittler were arrested and were charged with 321 counts of child abuse. Interestingly enough, during the preliminary hearings, Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pazder would meet with parents and children of the case and most likely influence them in their testimonies. In 1986, a district attorney would state that the evidence was weak and drop the charges for Virginia McMartin, Peggy Ann Bucky, Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babbitt Spittler. However, Peggy McMartin Bucky and Ray Bucky remained in custody and awaited trial. Peggy's bail was set at $1 million, which in today's money is roughly $3,800,000. Ray Bucky was denied bail. By January of 1990, all counts against Peggy McMartin Bucky had been dropped. However, Ray Bucky was only cleared of 52 of his 65 counts. He had all charges dismissed by July of 1990 after serving 5 years in jail without ever once having been convicted of committing a crime. As a society, as a species, we have not learned from the witch hunts of the 14th century to the 17th century, the Salem witch trials of the 16th century, the Red Scare of the 1920s, McCarthyism of the 1940s to the 1950s, or even the Satanic Panic of the 1980s to the 1990s. One small allegation, no matter how much truth it holds or not, can snowball into an avalanche of accusations meant to demonize another person. As we move into an information era, we find the Satanic Panic, the witch hunt, and McCarthyism all evolve and adapt to a new age. You see, these instances, especially Satanic Panic and the McCarthyism, had never really been about mass hysteria or fear at first. People utilized the already established fears of the times in order to create mass hysteria from what they felt could easily push their agenda. I mentioned that religion was to blame, but that was me planting seeds of what is to be feared in your head, as the media has throughout time. The reality is, we are the problem, not religion. People utilize religion to push their own agendas and ideologies onto others in order to help feed their twisted, demented necessities. Look now to the internet, as people use the fear of sexual abuse and pedophilia to take down people they simply do not like. And it's only exacerbated by those who truly are guilty of such crimes. But those who are not are also being taken down swiftly by the masses, regardless of whether or not there is evidence to the contrary. As with the Red Scare, whether there was someone who truly was practicing communism or not, it didn't matter. If someone didn't like you, they could easily throw you to the wolves with a false claim feeding into the fear of the masses. Satanic Panic as well. These things have adapted to a new age, and it's thanks to us as humans seeking out any way to have a witch hunt for our own pleasure. I can assure you this much: if there was money in it for those of the past, we might have seen far more killed than those who were left alive.